Hello and welcome back to Compendium Trivia, your one-stop shop for fascinating facts from the world of history and geography. Today, we will explore one of the most extraordinary ways of choosing a new national leader. On a journey through the mountains of Tibet, we will uncover how the Dalai Lama is elected. This isn't your typical election. There are no ballots, no campaigns, and no debates. Instead, it's a mystical process involving dreams, signs, and oracles. Say your prayer and brace yourself, because this one's going to be enlightening. Let's start with the basics. The Dalai Lama is the highest spiritual leader in Tibetan Buddhism. But he's also much more than that. For centuries, he was the political head of Tibet, a unique fusion of monk, monarch, and philosopher rolled into one. The title Dalai Lama is a combination of the Mongolic word Dali, meaning ocean, and the Tibetan word for master or guru. Thus, the title Dalai Lama usually translates to Ocean of Wisdom, a pretty dramatic job title. Tibetan Buddhists believe that each Dalai Lama is a reincarnation of the spirit of compassion, known as Avalokitesvara. This being has vowed to remain in the cycle of rebirth to help all sentient beings achieve enlightenment. So, when a Dalai Lama passes away, he doesn't really disappear. He is believed to be reborn in a different body. His death is not really a goodbye. It's more of a see you soon, possibly as a toddler in a remote village. Interestingly, the first recognized Dalai Lama wasn't actually the initial one in the line. Let me explain. The third Dalai Lama, Sonam Gyatso, was the first to receive the title, granted by the Mongol ruler Altan Khan in 1578. That explains the partly Mongolic origins of the name. It was then retroactively given to two previous Tibetan leaders making a Gendin Drup, who lived in the 15th century, to become officially the first Dalai Lama. It's a bit like Star Wars franchise where the episodes 4-6 came out before the episodes 1-3. So far, there have been 14 Dalai Lamas, the current one being Tenzin Gyatso. Each Dalai Lama is believed to be the reincarnation of the last one. And each one has been found in a process that reminds a bit of a detective work, but based in spirituality and tradition. So, how is the next Dalai Lama found? The process begins after the death of the current Dalai Lama, but sometimes, preparations begin even earlier if his health is failing. After the passing of their leader, the High Lamas of the Gelug school, one of the four major schools of Tibetan Buddhism, take on the sacred duty of finding his reincarnation. The search can take months or years, and it typically begins with spiritual signs. The clues that may point toward the direction of his rebirth are gathered in surprising ways. The Dalai Lama's deceased body is carefully observed. Which way it leans, which direction the head tilts, or where the smoke from its cremation drifts. Sometimes, visions are reported during meditative trances entered by the senior monks. Further clues may appear in the sacred lake of Lamo Latso, located in central Tibet. All of these signs together help to narrow down the region where the new Dalai Lama might be found. Once a promising location is determined, a group of monks travels there in disguise, to avoid attracting attention. The search usually stays within Tibetan regions, but there was one case of a Dalai Lama who was reincarnated outside the country, the fourth one, who was born in Mongolia. He was actually a great-grandson of a Mongol ruler Altan Khan who first came up with the title. Coincidence? Maybe. Strategic spiritual nepotism? Possibly. Circling back to the search process, the monks look for boys born around the time of the Dalai Lama's death. Candidates are examined for unusual calm, wisdom beyond their years, and memories of their past life. But the real challenge comes with the so-called items test. The boy is presented with a set of objects, some of which belong to the previous Dalai Lama, and some random decoys which are supposed to add a bit of confusion. If the child correctly identifies the right items, bingo! After the candidate passes the tests and gains approval from the High Lamas, he is officially acknowledged as the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. The current 14th Dalai Lama himself was recognized based on visions from the Lama Lat Soleil, and confirmed after he correctly identified his predecessor's belongings at just 2 years old. In today's world where even interns need 5 years experience, this kid came with several lifetimes under his belt. Once recognized, the child is taken to a monastery in Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. The traditional seat of Dalai Lama is a famous Potala Palace perched high above the city. Think of it like Hogwarts, but for reincarnated Buddhas. There he undergoes intense religious training, learning Buddhist philosophy, logic, ethics, and ritual practices. He's also given a new name and a new identity. From that moment on, he's revered as the embodiment of compassion itself. Interestingly, in the case of the current Dalai Lama, he also got a crash course in Western knowledge from Austrian mountaineer Heinrich Harrer, who taught him English and science, and even built a cinema for him, using a projector run off a Jeep engine. Their unlikely friendship became the subject of the film 7 Years in Tibet, which is a great watch for all adventurers. The centuries-long rule of the Dalai Lama over his kingdom changed dramatically in 1950, when China invaded and claimed Tibet as part of its territory. Despite the aggression, the young 14th Dalai Lama pursued diplomacy. He tried to work with Chinese authorities and even met Chairman Mao Zedong, who in Dalai Lama's own words, treated him like a father would treat a son. However, relations between the two countries continued to worsen, and in 1959, after a failed Tibetan uprising against Chinese, the Dalai Lama fled into exile in Dharamshala in India, where he established the Tibetan government in exile. Since then, he has become a global symbol of peace, nonviolence, and religious freedom. In 1989, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Over the years, the Dalai Lama has shifted his focus from independence to autonomy. He has said Tibet could remain part of China if it allows real cultural and religious freedom. And in 2011, he voluntarily gave up his political role, passing authority to an elected leader of the Central Tibetan Administration, a democratic government in exile. And this brings us to a critical question. What happens after the current Dalai Lama passes away? The 14th Dalai Lama is now in his late 80s. And the question of succession is deeply political, because China wants to control it. The Chinese government insists it will have the final say in naming the next Dalai Lama, under its controversial management of reincarnation law. Yes, you heard that right. These days even spiritual mysteries like reincarnation can be buried in bureaucracy. This would mean selecting a child within Chinese-controlled Tibet, likely one loyal to Beijing. But the Dalai Lama himself has preempted this. He has said that he may not reincarnate at all, or that he might reincarnate outside Tibet, perhaps even as a girl. He's also stated that the next Dalai Lama must be found with the consent of the Tibetan people. This twist may have massive geopolitical implications. If two different boys are declared Dalai Lamas, one chosen by China, and one by the Tibetan exile community, it could split Tibetan Buddhism for generations and decide about the future of the whole nation. To illustrate how China is trying to exert its power over the selection of the Dalai Lama, let's look at how they've meddled with the recognition of other spiritual leaders in Tibet. The Dalai Lama is the most famous one, but there are other ones such as the Panchen Lama and the Karmapa. Panchen Lama is traditionally the second highest spiritual authority in Tibetan Buddhism, who plays a role in identifying the next Dalai Lama, and vice versa. But here's where things take a dark turn. In 1995, the Dalai Lama identified a 6-year-old boy named Gedhun Choki Nyima as the next Panchen Lama. Just 3 days later, the boy and his family disappeared, taken by Chinese authorities. Since then he has never been seen in public again. China then appointed its own Panchen Lama, who is rejected by most Tibetans as a Beijing's puppet. Human rights organizations around the world have called this situation a forced disappearance. The United Nations, the EU, and the US have all demanded information about the original Panchen Lama whereabouts, but China insists the boy does not want to be disturbed, a statement which is not very assuring. In May 2020, the Chinese government alleged that the Panchen Lama is now a college graduate with a stable job, which sounds suspiciously like a vague LinkedIn bio. To many Tibetans, the real Panchen Lama is a political prisoner, a child whose only crime was being recognized by the Dalai Lama. And then there's the Karmapa Lama, the head of another major Buddhist school, who also clashed with the Chinese authorities. His real name is Ogyen Trinley Dorje, and was actually recognized by both the Dalai Lama and China, a very rare agreement. But at age 14, he made a dramatic escape from Chinese-controlled Tibet. After a perilous journey over the Himalayas, he arrived in India, saying he fled because he could not complete his religious training under the tight restrictions of Chinese rule. Now living in exile, the Karmapa is a respected spiritual leader and has become an advocate for environmental and cultural preservation. These two stories, the disappearance of the Panchen Lama and the escape of the Karmapa, show how deeply political the question of spiritual succession has become. For Beijing, these reincarnated leaders are seen as potential sources of resistance and identity. For Tibetans, they are living symbols of faith and continuity. Finding reincarnations of these spiritual leaders isn't just a religious matter. It's a struggle for the cultural survival of Tibet itself. So, how is the Dalai Lama elected? He isn't. He's discovered. Through tradition, mysticism, and generations of belief. The process is as much about preserving a spiritual legacy as it is about navigating the challenges of the modern world. In a time of technology and secularism, the Dalai Lama stands as a rare example of a deeply spiritual form of leadership that works in a circular way and spans over many generations. Whether you see it as a divine rebirth or a cultural tradition, there's no denying that the election of the Dalai Lama is one of the most fascinating successions on Earth. Thanks for watching this episode of Compendium Trivia. We hope you enjoyed the journey into the mountains of Tibet. It would be great to hear your thoughts on what the future may hold for the next Dalai Lamas. Tell us about that in the comment section. Feel free to like, subscribe, and turn the notification bell on. We've got more mysteries from around the world coming soon. Let us know which one would you like us to cover next.